Welcome to Compelling Conversations, where law meets business. With your host, Dara Rosenbaum, founding partner and attorney at Rosenbaum & Taylor in New York. You can watch episodes on YouTube and listen through Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and more. For prior episodes and free resources, go to www.rosenbaumtaylor.com/learn. Now here's the host of Compelling Conversations, Dara Rosenbaum.
I love that new intro. They picked all these pictures of me laughing, all these clips of me laughing, which means we have a good time on here. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Compelling Conversations. I am Dara Rosenbaum, and I am so pleased today to be welcoming Deeon Brown. Deeon Brown's going to be a great guest. He is a business coach and a veteran at creating and growing highly profitable business models, managing full spectrum creative programs, and developing highly collaborative teams. Deeon specializes in growing businesses through smart planning, aggressive lead generation, ambitious brand storytelling, team collaboration, resource allocation, and financial management. Deeon is a small business ideator who works with entrepreneurs to discover their voice in the market. Deeon is the owner of Project Big Brand, a company that creates, deconstructs, or repairs business programs. Deeon has upcoming books concerning business strategy, overcoming fear, work-life balance, and a plethora of tips and strategies he has implemented while coaching entrepreneurs, business owners, and executives. Deeon is a frequent consultant on emerging technologies, creative contributor of rising brands, speaker, teacher, and artist. He speaks and teaches and writes about how you can rethink the way your business markets. He is known for his timing, team, and tools approach to business growth. From Adidas to Keller Williams, Deeon has witnessed and contributed to some of the greatest marketing coaching programs around. With CEO and executive level marketing experience in the retail, hospitality, tourism, and real estate vertices, Deeon has the tools and tips to get both companies and individuals on their way to being big brands. Deeon is a media contributor and launched his podcast, Man vs. Brand, to analyze the intersectionality between brand and human experience. Deeon recently served as the #1 global real estate franchise as CEO of the Keller Williams Bronx office. During his tenure at the office, Deeon transacted over $375 million in closed sales. Previously, Deeon's agency, Project Big Brand, served as agency of record for Keller's Tribeca office, consulted their Midtown Manhattan office, and speaks around the globe on how to empower residents to become owners in their own neighborhoods. Deeon is based in Manhattan, but sees the world as his place of business. So it is my pleasure to have you today, Deeon. I love all that what I was able to put in the intro because it just tells everybody a lot about who you are. So welcome, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you, Dara, for having me on. And let me just say, I could see why you have so many photos with you smiling in the intro. Your smile is amazing.
Thank you.
It's an awesome smile. So I'm glad that it has it. Thank you for having me on the show. That bio was a bit long, but I definitely feel like it is a great summary of my experience in this business.
Absolutely. So why branding and marketing? Why was that what you chose to go into?
So I grew up in New York in the 80s, and I think that's when brands were huge, right? You had the Nike brand kind of emerging, Apple was emerging, Dell. You were really entering into this age of digital, right? That was kind of when we were started moving in that direction.
Sure.
And just being a kid from Brooklyn, very humble background in East New York, Brooklyn. I don't know if you guys know that, but shouts out to anyone on here that does. Sure. I would see these out-of-home billboards, right? With just sneakers or computers or technology or household consumer goods. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to know more about it because it didn't really exist in my neighborhood in an accessible sort of way. Okay. I would see the billboards, I wouldn't necessarily have access to the products. Okay. Into the goods. And so there was this gap between what I was experiencing, whether it was on TV, billboards, magazines, and what I actually had in my household. Mm-hmm. And so that just drove this idea of understanding brands, understanding consumer habits, understanding the visual importance of brand representation and what that meant to different people in different places in the world.
Mm-hmm. And so how'd you get started? I mean, obviously, little kid in Brooklyn, curious, what was the next step?
All right. So the story is a bit, it's a bit sad, but it moves into a really good place. So bear with me.
We have a promise of a happy ending.
There we go. Right. So both my parents passed by the time I was 13.
Oh, so
I was an only child. My grandparents had the thought that maybe I should leave New York. And so I went to boarding school in New Hampshire. I went to Brewster Academy in Wolfboro, really great school.
Mm-hmm.
While I was there, I had an English teacher who very much understood that I wanted to both excel in written language, mm-hmm. And also in the arts. And her name was Mrs. Shea. She really, really advocated for me. Now, granted, I was a kid from Brooklyn. I probably hadn't gone further than Pennsylvania to mm-hmm. Philadelphia to see the Bell in my entire life, right? Like I hadn't gone very many places.
I grew up on Long Island. That was my 6th grade trip. Was to
exactly that's exactly what it was, right?
Like all of those touristy highlights in like one afternoon.
Exactly, right? So you go see these things, and that's really your representation of the world, right? Mm-hmm. At least for me. So she really, really pushed for me to be in AP classes, to study art history, to really get the foundational stuff of branding, color theory, all that great stuff. Now, I didn't know it at the time. At the time, I was just really inspired by this great teacher that connected with me on an intimate level. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't really have a solid idea. Fast forward to college, I'm at Emory, and I'm going to Spain to experience art. I'm majoring in art history. Ended up changing my major, by the way. I realized art history wasn't going to get me to where I wanted to go alone, right? But I wanted to do that, and so I was in a really good space for it. I became maybe the social chair of my fraternity, and somebody was like, "Hey, man, Jack Daniels wants to do a promotion in college. Do you want to do that?" Right? And I was just like, yeah. But I also, because I had this background, because I had this woman, Mrs. Shea, in my past that had catalyzed a lot of what I thought about brands, what I thought about being able to communicate effectively, mm-hmm. I saw a bigger opportunity there. And I basically, in my junior year of college, pushed for more opportunity. And so I ended up getting into spirits, or liquor and wine, and then eventually I moved into consumer goods, mm-hmm. Moved then into athletics, leisure, and then as I'm going along, I'm learning about consumer metrics. I'm learning about consumer data and surveying. I'm mm-hmm. learning about advertisement and advertisement spend, right? So as I'm moving along in this career path, I'm also adding all the ancillary things that you need to know to have a full idea of what consumer behavior and brand is about. And now we're here and I'm on this podcast.
Yes. And where does the coaching come in? Because I know you're also doing business coaching. So how do you get from, Mrs. Shea's English class to now I'm doing business coaching?
Absolutely. Great question. So it really became an outpouring. I think who I am as a person is someone who just loves to communicate. I love to tell stories.
It should be clear to the listeners and the viewers that you are the kind of guy who loves to communicate and tell stories.
Absolutely. Yeah. I really like to listen. And it's very important for me to use previous lessons that I've learned, that I've experienced from others, mm-hmm. To inform decisions that either I or my network makes.
Yep.
And lastly, I'm a huge reader, right? That's the one thing that Mrs. Shea made sure I did was I read about 30 books a year. Now I know some people are like, I read 70 books. I read, 100 books. I don't know about that. My number works for me, right? So I read a healthy amount. So then you have multiple disciplines, multiple schools of thought to pull from. Mm-hmm. So I would coach as a part of my business approach as an agency owner. So I would take my clients, they would want to know about how should they start their brand, and it would be very much teaching moments.
Right.
Enter Keller Williams, which is one of the largest training companies in the world, who has a stellar, phenomenal training program. It became a part of my day. Like it was mandatory that coaching be a part of my strategy to retain good talent, to secure good talent, to help my team grow. And so when I left Keller, I knew that I was on the right track in terms of training and coaching. And so I got some higher level certifications and did some specific certifications in areas that I really wanted to focus on, like time management, stress management, goal setting, right? Which, is sort of general for all coaches. But I found that folks that I was connected to, that folks that I was being introduced to, really had some concerns in those specific areas, specifically as a reaction to how their time had changed for the pandemic. And so I wanted to make sure I had those skill sets in play, and that's how I became a coach.
I love it. I love that story. So let's go back to the books for a second, because it sounds like you're a wealth of knowledge there. What a couple of books that you'd recommend to business leaders or business owners, new entrepreneurs, established entrepreneurs, that you think are just really great resources?
Okay, so for a second, can I pivot to make sure I get the writer of the books? Correct, because I'm really good with names of books. I'm really bad with authors.
Okay, fair enough. Let's get it right.
So give me a second. I'm gonna look this way, guys. I apologize. It's my bookshelf. All right. No, seriously, it's important. All right. So
it is, absolutely.
Gary Keller wrote a book. Who is the in full discretion, is the owner of Keller Williams as a whole. But he wrote this book with, I believe, Jay Papasan. I can't see it, and it's called The One Thing. And The One Thing is an amazing book that really allows you to hone in on what's important to you, right? What's the thing that's going to drive your business? I know what's the thing that's going to drive your life. In some circumstances, people describe it as your big why. Other people describe it as your what, depending on what school of thought you're from. But that's an amazing book. Now, I'm going to, for 1 second, see. There's a book called Insanely Simple. There's a theme here, guys. There's a theme here. There's a book called Insanely Simple, and the book was written by Ken Siegel. So Insanely Simple is a book about the creative director and at one point agency of record that was at Apple. Okay. And he was at Apple during Steve Jobs' reign, specifically that time frame from like the iPod 1 till actually it starts with him being at Apple, leaving Apple, coming back to Apple, starting the iPod, and everything it took for them to get their simple marketing approach, specifically when they were racing against Dell as who would have the greater market share. Right. And so that's a really great book. Another book that I've read is called The Big Four. Let me give you the author. 1 sec, guys. The Big Four is specifically about Amazon, Google, Apple, and I'm missing Amazon, Google, Apple, and I'm missing the last one.
And the fourth one.
Yeah, man. Whatever the fourth one is. It's a book that really goes into what they specifically did in order to get to the point that they are in business. All right, Dara, I'm gonna make sure that your audience has this information correct, because so the author is Scott Galloway. Facebook. How could we not?
There you go.
You can tell, guys, right? Like I'm really pulling some good resources for you guys.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Really
And I think
coming
somebody who reads as much as you do. I love everyone. I love people to share what they like, what they read, because there's listen, those bookshelves and virtual bookshelves out there are crowded. So it's always good to get a recommendation from somebody who's read a lot, culled through a lot, and can kind of maybe focus somebody on something that's a really good resource.
Yeah, The Four by Scott Galloway. It's all about the DNA of each of the companies. So it's Apple, Amazon, Facebook, Google. Really goes into exactly what was happening in those organizations in order for them to be successful. I know that I've given sort of one mindset book, two business books that sort of focus on mindset. I'm going to give you one more if I can. Is that cool, Dara?
Please, absolutely. Go ahead. Sure.
I'm going to give you one more that I think is super important. I'm just going to look for 1 second.
Yep.
Okay. Has everyone heard of Good to Great?
Mm-hmm.
Good to Great is an amazing book that could change not only your life, but your team, your family. It talks about companies, but companies are really a stand-in for almost any group of individuals for whom you have influence over, and that you particularly want to affect into a positive change. So it's Jim Collins. It's Good to Great.
Yep.
I think
I know the book. That works for families, organizations, businesses, communities, neighborhoods. It really works in any sort of setting. You're absolutely right.
Special shout out for Fierce Conversations. I'm not sure of who she is, the author's name, but if you guys want to look up another book, Fierce Conversations talks about communication, interpersonal, team, family communication. So if you guys are interested in those books, then I highly recommend them.
And I can link all those in the show notes that everybody has those, because it sounds like a great set of books. And speaking of books, you've got a couple coming out.
I do have a couple coming out.
I don't think I've ever used that phrase before. Most people I meet have a book coming out. It sounds like you're swinging for the fences, and we've got a bunch of books coming out.
Well, so a big part of what I've been doing as a coach is really honing in on some areas that I think affect folks out there. So first book to come out is called Fear is Your To-Do List. It drops this year.
Fear is your to-do list.
Fear is your to-do list, right? And so goes over fear. Fear is a biological response. Fear as a practical response to environmental stimuli. Fear for the individual. Fear for the society. And then we start to look at how to take fear and look at it almost like a project. So we approach it as it's a part of your to-do list. How do you get to the point where you can confront that fear in a safe way, right? And then who are the people, who are the entities that you should have as your support system to ensure that when you're approaching that fear, that you're doing so safely, but also that you're supported in a way that this isn't an individual endeavor. The book also highlights some folks like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who fought through cancer during her judgeship, to also talk about individuals, right? So I have some really good recreated photos of them, and I talk about their journey, and I ask the reader to do more research, because there are some really great people who I think we don't really know about how they specifically fought through the fear of what they were going through in order for them to do the things that they had done. So Fear is Your To-Do List is my first adult book.
And you started I think you started to say that when it's coming out.
Yeah, so Fear is Your To-Do List comes out this year. I also have a book for children. And it's called Brown, Brave, and You. The book approaches skin tone and children's understanding of skin tone. As telling you sort of my earlier story, as a youth, moving from a very small community in East New York, Brooklyn, to being in New Hampshire at a boarding school, I very quickly started to understand concepts that I didn't really understand before, right? Like, oh, you're dark. I'm like, I am, right? And I didn't think so, right?
Right.
And so you start to understand how large the world is. And so the book serves to teach kids that are in the 4 to about age 10 range about not only their skin tone and loving their skin tone and the diversity of skin tones, but also how large the world is and how different bodies are represented in different places in the world and what they understand about themselves.
I love that. I'm really looking forward to that one. My daughter's 3, so she's right in that 4 to 10 range. So I love that idea.
Absolutely. Yeah, it'll be really good to be a read to book, and if you're an older child, then you can actually read through it yourself. So
absolutely. I love the title of the first book, the adult book. The fear is your to-do list, because I feel like my gut reaction, and probably most people's reaction, is like, I don't want fear on my to-do list. I want to walk away from it. I want to avoid it. I want to figure out how to, how not to face it, as opposed to it really informing what you need to be working on.
Absolutely. And listen, you find when you're looking at most people's to-do list, that the thing that they're procrastinating on is oftentimes the thing that will be most influential to their success.
Absolutely.
Right? And so in that way, I think it is really the thing that you're having anxiety about, the thing that you're concerned about is probably the thing that's really going to move the needle in your success. And so how do we get to that thing instead of just doing the easy thing, instead of cleaning the house or, or your bills or whatever that thing is, right? That you default to. How do you get to that thing that you're really avoiding and focus on that thing as your best growth method?
And I think, you hear that. I think that people kind of pick off the things that are low hanging fruit, as opposed to going after that big thing that's really going to make the difference.
Absolutely. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to be a person that trains your mind to only do the things that are easy, because your breakthrough is in challenging yourself, right? And so when we're able to do that, whether it's taking a flight to maybe see that brother you haven't seen, or getting in the water with your daughter, right? When she wants to go to the beach, and maybe you have a fear of water, and you take steps so that you can share in that experience. Maybe it's starting a business and just getting through the fear of maybe not understanding tax or not understanding LLC formations, right? Like maybe those things are what's holding you back from what's next for you, and how can you approach it in a way that that is unbiased in one fear being greater than the other or more important than the other, and approach it objectively so that you get to the place that you need to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So Deeon, you do so much between the coaching and the marketing and the branding. What is your typical engagement with a client look like? Or if there is such a thing?
Well, for me, it's a lot of listening. I know I'm talking a lot on this podcast.
No, it's okay.
That's what we're here for, right? That's what we're here for. It's a lot of listening. It's a lot of probing questions. I think that we have unfortunately been conditioned to kind of be in funnels a bit, right? You sign up for something. Hey, I want coaching. Then you get a PDF, and then someone calls you and they try to throw you into a program, and it feels very much like you're being pushed forward instead of being held still and asked, what do you aspire to do? What hats are you wearing that compete with the journey you want to take?
Right.
What are your biggest time lags? Like, where do you find yourself spending a lot of time at that you think in a better world you can do those things more effectively, or give those things to someone else so you can open up your time for the thing you want to do? Another question is, what's one thing that if we address right now would have the greatest net effect on everything else in your life? Right? Some folks, it's my marriage. Some folks, it's my business. For some folks, it's I'm working a 9 to 5 and I want to transition into my own business, right? And that becomes sort of the center points of what we're discussing, right? And I think that in the process of listening and asking probing questions, first you find that that clients feel heard, they feel considered.
Absolutely.
And they also feel a connection, right? Because as they're sharing and you're listening, your ability to reflect their concerns or to drill down maybe some of the things that they want addressed, they find that they feel really connected to you, which feels very different than maybe a bot online or, an Instagram story that they're reading that feels aspirational. And so my process is very much to build relationship.
I like that idea. And I think to me, what feels so special about you is the holistic approach you take. Because it feels to me like, you're not just focusing on the brand development, you're not just focusing on the color story or, the marketing aspect. You're thinking about like, well, what about time management is holding you back? Or, what does the rest of your life look like that's affecting your entrepreneurial journey? Or what's holding you back from making your side hustle your permanent full-time job? So I really like the sort of the very full service approach to it. It's like, let's look at all these different areas, because if we just focus on, developing a brand, but there's something that's holding you back from actually putting yourself out there, it's not going to work.
Absolutely. And I think what's important about what you just described, Dara, is that it really does speak to this idea that you wear different hats. You're not different people, right? You're not a different person, right? So you as an attorney is also you as a mom, which is also you as a sister or a daughter, right? And so how do we ensure that the goals that you have in one section, right, which may be about marketing and branding, are fully realized because the other parts of your life are working in accordance to what your dream is right now, that you're in social contract with a husband, with your kids, to let them know, hey, this is mommy's time to grow her business. This is my time to focus on that. So that when you are focusing on your logo, when you are focused on advertisement, when you are focused on creating a name, that you're present, that you're fully engaged, that you have done the homework necessary for our time to be spent in the most effective way possible. Otherwise, you're going to be maybe 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, whatever that time frame is in, and feel like we haven't progressed in the way that we should have, because there are other things that are outside of my realm of control that are also competing for your time and attention.
Right. It feels to me, and I like that answer very much. I think what it feels to me is it sort of comes down to probably that, the curiosity of that little boy growing up in Brooklyn, that, you wanted to understand how things worked and how things worked together. And it wasn't just a singular focus. It was very broad approach to solving problems. And I think, it sounds like Mrs. Shea helped you with that quite a bit. So I think having that really broad approach there is something that's really significant. I think we may have lost Deeon. All right. Well, I'll just reflect a little bit on what Deeon was talking about, and I think that, like I was saying, was that it's very sort of special sauce there, and a very there you are, you're back. I was just going to start reflecting kind of on what we were talking about, but
I'm not quite sure what happened. I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. What I was saying was that I think that a lot of what you describe comes out of that curiosity of that little boy growing up in Brooklyn, where you wanted to understand, not just what the ads meant, but what that, what those products were that they were advertising, and what consumer behavior looked like, and, getting an art history background and color story and marketing principles and time management principles and self-development principles. And I think that there's a lot of curiosity to me that is in you, that probably leads you to really help your clients by helping them discover things that they may not even be thinking about, that might be affecting them either personally or professionally. And I applaud that, because I think it's a really special approach.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Like, I think that in this journey, I've found, right, that if you really are person centric, right? So if you're focused on people, in seeing the best in people, in extracting the most from people, that you end up in a space where you are moving with a level of intent, but you're also being informed by everyone else's next steps for you, right? So I didn't want to be an author. A bunch of my clients were just like, have you written a book yet? I'm like, no. They're like,
Yep.
You should. I'm like, why should I?
Right.
I didn't want to be a podcast person. To be fair, I didn't think that I like platform building, but it wasn't necessarily for me. Mm-hmm. Someone was like, you have a really nice voice and really nice things.
That's actually very, very true. That is actually very true.
Like, you should be on a podcast. And I was like, okay, right. But it's also because I spent a lot of time seeding into those people the things that they should consider. Right. And so when you get that back in reciprocity, it becomes this thing where you're like, wow, I hadn't considered that. Right. I hadn't considered being the coach. I hadn't considered this. But someone else that I have supported in their journey now wants to support me. Let's see where that thing can take me. And I think that that's really important. You know, I met you on my podcast.
Yeah, that's right.
We had an amazing conversation.
We did. I had a great time.
Absolutely, right? And then you invited me to yours. And so now I'm wearing the guest hat, right? Where I was before the host. And I think that it's these sorts of engagements, right? These sorts of interpersonal transactions that really move us forward into special spaces where we're not only, you know, talking to one another, but we're also recommending books. We're also giving tips on LLCs. We're talking about client relationships, right? And you guys, the audience, also get to participate in these really cool, passion-driven, informed conversations. And so, you know, so much of my life has been pushed forward by curiosity, but also by meeting people like you that really helped me to be a fuller, better version of myself.
Well, I appreciate that. I would say the same about you. You know, I think that one of the things that I preach very, very strongly to my business clients of, you know, whether they're solopreneurs or mid-sized businesses or anything in between, is just you know, keep your eyes open to all those people who can be resources to you, who can make those suggestions. Hey, have you thought about doing this? I mean, there's a woman named Rochelle Listener, who is the reason I have a podcast. Because I met her in a different context and she said, you need to have a podcast. And I said, no, I don't. She said, no, really. And she's got Rochelle's a strong woman and got a great personality and she's very persuasive. So here I am.
And it's those sorts of people, right? It's the Miss Shays of the world, right? That help to inform possibility, right? And listen, I think we're all driven folks, right? Like your audience, you, myself, we're all pushing something forward. It's nice when folks see a world, an ecosystem that's slightly different or slightly greater or slightly broader than what we had imagined for ourselves. And then we're led into all of the possibilities and opportunities that thing produces.
I think I'd be remiss if I didn't ask whether you've been in touch with Ms. Shay since you left high school.
So I have. Ms. Shay is one of those people that she's still teaching.
Really?
Yeah, and I was in her class 30 years ago. She has
impacted a lot of lives in those
30 years. Exactly, right? So we talk, but she's focused on the next crop of me's, right, in the world. So a lot of our conversation is now about being we're not close in age, but I think there's some life experiences that we both share. And so I recommend books to her. I talk about books that I read. She informs me about, you know, the person in her class that she's really excited about seeing in their next step. And then I ensure that I connect with that person and offer to just, if you need any help, I also went to the same school as you. You know, if you're ever in New York and you want to grab a coffee when you graduate, please do. Would love to have you. And so it's about creating relationships.
That's great that you can make that connection with somebody who, you know, the little you from 30 years ago.
Absolutely.
Speaking now, I know offline we were talking about J.M. Ryerson.
Yes.
So I just want to mention that before we close to make sure that we talk about, you know, in addition to somebody else who whose opinions you value, whose offerings you value. I want to just kind of bring that to the forefront.
So JM is probably one of the only people that I know that has more energy, more kinetic energy in their conversation, in their approach than I do. So he runs.
Wait. I'm gonna have to find that hard to believe.
No, it's when you see both of us together, it's like I don't even know. It's like watching an explosion happen.
You guys should stay away from fault lines.
Absolutely. So James runs a company called Let's Go Win. He also has a book out called Let's Go Win. And it's an organization that's about empowerment. He's about empowerment. He is a person who has a compelling story about building his business, that business failing, sort of pushing through in his marriage to get it done, and then being on the other side of it, but also being a dad and looking at himself and figuring out what's his legacy, not just for all of the people that he's affected in his coaching program, but also, the two sons that he has. And so he has an awesome, compelling story. The book is a great read. Let's Go Win. The company Let's Go Win is one that's transformative. And so if I said, hey, Dara, here's the next person that you should have on your podcast that I think would compel your audience, inform your audience, excite your audience, it's definitely going to be Jam.
I think that'll be my call this afternoon because you kept calling him compelling, and that's just the name of the podcast. So I got to go right there. Listen,
the guy, there's something about his energy. There's something about his passion, and there's something about the breadth of information that he has. And so, yeah, man.
Listeners, viewers, look forward to listening to J.M. Ryerson because I'm going to go out and try to get him.
Absolutely. Please do.
So Deeon, before we close, what I like to ask everybody who's been on, any kind of journey, and especially the kind of journey you've been on, is what's one thing that you learned along the way you wish you'd known earlier?
I wish I'd known earlier. Wow. So much. I think that probably the most important lesson that I learned maybe midway in my life and in my career is that every human being has a story, right? And sometimes you just need to listen to the story, right? I'll give you a great example. New York has, as you know, a pretty voluminous homeless population.
Yes.
But then we find out that a lot of those individuals were soldiers at one point. And this isn't a soldiers and PTSD mental health conversation. It's just you can look at someone and say, hey, you're homeless. How did you get here? You must have a drug problem. Or you can look at someone and go, whatever life path has gotten you here, I hope it resolves itself. Right. And that's just two very different ways of approaching a very similar thing. And so for me, I'm super, super nice on any new client engagement to the receptionist, because I don't know who she is. I don't know what her story is. And you can look at the person and go, oh, you're just a receptionist. Or you can look at the person and go, hey, you are connected to this team of individuals that I want to know intimately. Right. So I'm going to give you the utmost respect. Doormen in buildings.
Oh, yeah.
You know everyone, right? So I'm not going to look at a building that I want to maybe move into or purchase an apartment in and walk past the doorman. That's my first point of contact for the rest of my life, right? So start off really nice to that guy instead of looking at them like they're just the person to open the door, right? And so just understanding that everyone's gotten a story that's gotten them to the place that they are, and to have empathy and investment in some small way into that story so that you understand and connect with them better, just will open up so many doors for you that you didn't even know were available to you if you just take the time to understand a bit more about a story.
I love that. That's really beautiful. So I know people are going to want to find out more about you. How do they find you?
All right. So as mentioned in the opening, well, you know what? First, guys, stop right now. Put this thing on pause if you can. Go find Dara's episode on any platform that it's on and like it, follow it, share this right now on social media. She's doing some really great work for you. We also know that she's busy, so she could be doing anything. She could be with her daughter. She could be in court right now. There's so many other things she could be doing. So before I answer,
I'm happy right here.
No, but that's what I'm saying. So before I tell you how to reach out to me and to connect to me, take a second and connect with her in a more specific, more intentional way. So I want you guys to do that right now, and then I'm going to tell you how to get in contact with me. So make sure you do all the work to ensure that you're connected with Dara on all her platforms and anywhere where this episode is going to go. All right.
Very generous. Thank you.
Absolutely. So to answer your question, I'm on Instagram as best Deeon ever. I think I am the best Deeon. I do have some competition. Deeon Warwick for one, right? But
she's got a different spelling, so you're all good.
Exactly. Mostly though, you can get me on my websites, and my websites will lead you to the appropriate social. So if you're interested in client engagement and coaching, it's projectbigbrand.com. You can also go to deonbrown.com, and that's going to give you, books. That's going to give you coaching. That's going to lead you to that website. If you're interested in my podcast after you listen to Dara's podcast, we're okay with that. Her episode is on it, so check that out. Right, that's Man versus Brand. So that's how you can get in contact with me. I'm huge about connections, so make sure you let me know that Dara's the way that you were introduced to me, so that I can give her that good feedback to let her know that she's being impactful and that what she's doing over here is really having an amazing output of connecting individuals who need support with the folks who can best serve them.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Dan. This has been another wonderful conversation, and look forward to staying in touch with you, obviously, and seeing all the great things you're going to do next.
Absolutely. And listen, if I need any sort of support in my business, I know who the trusted advisor is that I'm going to go to, right? Like guys, let me just say this as maybe just my closing. Finding folks that you trust, specifically in small business growth, is the most important thing. Now, sales is probably your number one. If you're not doing sales, you don't have a business. But your sales won't be supported, your revenue won't be supported, your business model won't be supported unless you have trusted advisors in your camp. And so when you have someone that's delivering content, that's delivering conversation, that is passionate about their own practice and about their practice as a stand-in for small business growth and development, then this is what we call a trusted advisor. This is what we call a person that you can, like I'm having a conversation with Dara right now, you can call her up, email her, and she'll be as responsive and ask the questions that need to be asked, like this episode. And so just make sure that, that you listen to this and you love it for what it is, but that you also understand that this is the markings, these are the signs of someone who will be as committed to your business as they are into having conversations about your business.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dan. This was absolutely wonderful. Thank you again.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.